Now in this video, I want to give you a quick overview of LangGraph by starting with exactly what LangGraph is, break down its core concepts, explore what sets it apart from other AI agent frameworks, and finally see it in action by building a simple graph using Python. I'm so excited. Let's get started. Now let's start with what is LangGraph. To give you actually the simplest definition, LangGraph is an AI agent framework that makes it easier for developers to develop systems that use multiple LLMs and tools to solve a complex problem. Basically, it's the idea of using multiple LLMs to solve a problem or to answer a question instead of one LLM, which is what we normally do with ChatGPT chatbot. Now, what I really like about LangGraph and what sets it apart from other agent frameworks like Crew AI or AutoGen is its ability to give you a low-level control over the orchestration of LLMs, tool calling, and memory, allowing you to create an incredible, smart, customizable, fast, and cheap to run AI agents. However, unlike Crew AI, which is so easy to use, this level of control that the LangGraph gives you comes with a learning curve. And that's exactly why I made this video, to give you a solid understanding of the framework without overwhelming you with too much technical details. Let's start with explaining the main concepts of LangGraph, with the first concept, graph, which is the concept that the whole LangGraph is based on. Think of the graph as in like the workflow that connects the user's question to the AI agent's response. You can think of it as the thought process of the AI agent. Now, as you can see from the graph, it's made up of different nodes connected together. You can think of nodes as the thoughts or actions. Technically speaking, each node could be an LLM or a Python function. Now, for example, this node could be an LLM to make a certain decision, and this node could be some kind of a function to search the internet. All of those nodes are working together to just give you an accurate answer. Now that we've explained the concept of nodes, let's move on to the concept of edges. The edges in the graph represents the connections or the relationships between the thoughts, basically the nodes. They determine how information flows from one step to the next, guiding the path of reasoning that the AI agent takes to solve the problem. Now let's move on to the final concept, which is the concept of state. You can think of the state as in like the memory or the context that's maintained throughout the execution of the thought process or the graph. For example, if the agent have passed from node number 1 to node number 3, the agent might sometimes need to remember or know what happened in node number 1. And this is what state helps with. It helps the agent to remember what happened in the previous nodes all the way to the end and finally provide a complete answer with a context. Now, I hope you understood the main concepts of LangGraph. Now let's move on and see these concepts in action. Now the graph that we'll be developing today will be this graph, which is a simple graph that just has 3 nodes, and then it starts with node number 1, and then from node number 1 it will have something called conditional edge, and that conditional edge is basically a Python function that will decide if we were going to go to either number 2 or number 3, and then once we go to either number 1 or number 3, then we'll go to the end, and then the graph will end exactly like that. It's as simple as that. Now let's plan the steps on how we're going to develop this graph. First step that we're going to be doing is create 3 functions: the start function, the process credit card function, and the process PayPal function. Those 3 functions will act as the nodes, and then we're going to create a function called decide payment method, which will be acting as the conditional edge. The second thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to create the state dictionary. The third thing that we're going to be doing is we're finally going to build the graph and then assign it to the 3 nodes that we've created, and of course assign the state to the graph. The fourth thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be designing the logic of the graph by adding the edges and of course the conditional edge. And the fifth thing that we're going to be doing is compile the graph and finally invoke the graph. Now, the first thing that we're going to be doing is create the 3 function nodes, and those 3 function nodes would only print out statements. So if we ever in the start function, this start function, that its only job is just printing out you have selected and then the value that's inside the dictionary of the graph state. And the second function will be process credit card payment, and its only job is to print out processing payment via credit card. And the third one, which is process PayPal payment, and its job is to only print out these 2 lines. Now, the second thing that we're going to be doing is create the state dictionary, which will be a type of typed dictionary. For all the people that don't know what typed dictionary is basically a way that you could actually define what type of data will be inside the dictionary. Now, of course, for us to use the type of dictionary, we need to import class. Now let's import the class. Now, let's create the decide payment method, which will be serving as the conditional edge. Now, it will return literal, which basically means the return value of the decide payment method will be either this keyword, which basically process credit card payment, or process PayPal payment. Now, if we go inside the code or inside the function, we could see that we're saving the value of the dictionary graph state inside the user input. And then what we're saying is if the user input contains the string credit card, then return this one. And of course, if it doesn't, it will to return the keyword process PayPal payment. This is a straightforward and a simple function that decides which function will be returned, either this or that, based on the value of the state dictionary. Now, of course, we need to import the literal class. And then we finally gonna move on to step number 3, which is building the graph. Now to build the graph, you're just gonna have to do this. The first thing is you're gonna register the state that you've already created using the state graph function. Now, of course, we need to import the state graph function and other keywords that we will be needing after this step. Now, after we register our state, which is the dictionary, now the second step will be registering our 3 functions as nodes. Now you're going to start with the node name, and after the comma, you're just going to add the function, of course, which is our function here. And we're going to be registering the second function as a node, and we're going to be registering the third function as a node. After we registered all of our nodes, now we create the logic, or we design the logic of our graph by adding the edges. Now, the way that we want to add the edges is just going to use add edge, and then before each edge, of course, for us to tell LangGraph to start with this function, we're going to have to use this keyword or constant that we've already imported all the way from here. And then after that, just going to put a string of the function name or the node name, basically. Then after that, we're going to be adding our conditional edge. And then, of course, the first thing that we're going to be adding for the conditional edge, or basically as a parameter for our conditional edge, is the source of the node. So our source will be this function called start, or this node that's called start. And then after the start, the system will go to, before going to these 2 functions, it will go to this function, which is a conditional edge, and then our function will decide to either go with either this function or either this function. Now, after we add our conditional edge, now we add the other 2 edges, which is, okay, after we decide which function to go to, then from these functions, process credit card payment, then it will just end from there. And then we add another edge, which is process PayPal payment, and then it goes from there. So it starts from the node start, go to the conditional edge, and based on this function, it will decide if we want to go either to this one or this one. And once we go to either one of them, then the system will end. I hope that is simple to understand. Now, after that, what we're going to do is we're going to compile the graph, and we can do this by easily saying graph equals builder.compile. Now, after we compile, so the compiling basically means like preparing the nodes and the edges for execution. Now we're finally are going to execute or invoke the graph, and of course you can invoke it with a default value of the graph state, and just gonna say payable. Now let's run our application. Since our file name is called simplegraph.py, what we're gonna do is python3 simplegraph.py. Now we say okay, and as you can see, it says it goes to the first function, which is the start, and it says you have selected, and of course, since I selected payable, it says PayPal. Now, after that, it goes to the conditional edge. The conditional edge decides if it's a credit card or PayPal. If it's a PayPal, it returns a PayPal, and then after that, it goes to the PayPal method, and then on the PayPal method, it says, as you can see, processing payment via PayPal, PayPal amount successful order completed. Now, let's test it with credit card. Execute it, Python 3. As you can see, you have selected credit card. This is in the start function. Then it goes to the processing credit card payment, then credit card done. Then it finally prints the graph state. Now, this is one of the easiest graph that you will ever see. How this can get advanced is you can invoke LLM from here. You could invoke, for example, an API call from here, or you could do another thing from here and invoke an API to do some kind of an action in here. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope I gave you everything you need to know about LangGraph without going into much technical details. LangGraph opens up a world of possibilities for creating intelligent and interactive systems. What kind of applications do you envision building with LangGraph? Share your ideas in the comments down below.